deep state. There's TOS stuff in it. Is there? Susurluk. When people say, Hasan, why are you anti-NATO? When people say, Hasan, why are you anti-NATO as a Turkish person? I suspect that the many different mentions of how all matter of revolutionary and socialist movements in Turkey were absolutely gutted and eviscerated by the government and the Turkish Milli İstihbarat Teşkilatı, and how it was propped up, created, designed by the Americans, by the CIA, and how how NATO propped up the mafia, the Turkish mafia, alongside the creation of the Turkish ultranationalist movement, the Grey Wolves, and how they destroyed any matter of Turkish socialism in Turkey in an identical fashion to Gladio in Italy, as a matter of fact. Let's watch.
On an early November evening in 1996, a black Mercedes, traveling at nearly 110 miles per hour, crashed into a truck near Susurluk in western Turkey. 3 of the 4 passengers in the car died instantly. When a few local journalists arrived at the scene, they had expected to find a irregular car accident. But what they discovered would shock Turkey to the core.
Kanal D.
İyi akşamlar sayın seyirciler. Türkiye'yi sarsan Susurluk kazası.
Among the accident victims, notorious contract killer for a CIA-assisted secret organization, Abdullah Çatlı, who was also a leader of the fascist Grey Wolves and an underworld drug lord wanted by Interpol, and his girlfriend, former beauty queen Gonca Uz. So far so good, nothing to be shocked about. But who else was in this car? The third victim, Istanbul Deputy Police Chief Hüseyin Kocada. The fourth person, the seriously injured Sedat Bucak, was a conservative member of parliament who was also a big landowner and the leader of several state-supported village guard units engaged in the war against Kurdish liberation fighters. Now, this is not good. Why the hell were a police chief, a politician, and a fascist criminal in the same car? It's not as if these people just happened to share an Uber pool or something. No serious arrests were made after the incident, and the concrete ties between the passengers remain shrouded in mystery to this day. In what came to be known as the Susurluk scandal, parliamentary investigations scratched the surface of a vast shadow network involved in one of the bloodiest and most mysterious periods in the modern history of Turkey. An interconnected web of Turkish police, military, secret service, politicians, criminal bosses, fascist paramilitaries, and the CIA, united by a common goal: eliminate communism. Turkey, officially the Republic of Türkiye, is situated on the Anatolian Peninsula in Western Asia, spanning across 2 continents, giving it an important geopolitical position and making it a regional power of significance. As an early member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, the Turkish armed forces constitute the 2nd largest standing military force in NATO. Turkey also hosts the Incirlik Air Base, operated and controlled by the US Air Force, which served as a main hub for operations during the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Ankara, Turkey's 2nd largest city, serves as the nation's capital, while Istanbul, its largest city, acts as the primary financial hub. Turkey currently ranks as the world's 20th largest economy in terms of nominal GDP. This February, more than 50,000 people lost their lives following the terrifying earthquakes in Turkey and Syria, and the disastrous effects and the response are dramatically worsened by the profit-based system and the according corruption of the government. Kurdish regions are hit especially hard, and there's a history behind this. Turkey was already in a horrible situation this year with inflation soaring and its currency collapsing. On top of it, the country is headed toward the general election on May 14, in which the current president is expected to use all available means to stay in power. His opponent, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, leader of the Republican People's Party, or short CHP, formed an alliance appealing to voters from the liberal left to the conservative right. We'll look at the important history of that party soon. Since 2002, Turkey's political system has been under the rule of the Justice and Development Party, or AKP, and its leader Recep Tayyip Erdoğan. Under Erdoğan, the country has faced recession and stagnation in the last decade, accompanied by high inflation in this year, and went through a shift from a parliamentary republic to an executive presidential system, eroding the so-called separation of powers in bourgeois democracy. Traditionally, the prime minister position has been more important, but since the 2017 referendum, the prime minister position has been abolished, and now the president has much greater executive power.
Videoyu yükleyen Türk mü yoksa değil mi? Galiba Almancı. Bilmiyorum. Bu kadar fazla bilmez çünkü normalde. Bu Almanya'da da Almancı olma ihtimali var yani. Çünkü yoksa nereden bilir bu kadar bilmiyorum yani Türk yani Türkiye'nin tarihini.
In order to more fully grasp Turkish politics.
Abi yok, ben bu elemandan özellikle istedim araştırıp yapmasını. Ha öyle mi? Ben zannediyorum ki belki hani Kürt Almancı olabilir.
Turkey's role within imperialism today and the roots of the fascistic character of its political system, we need to turn the clock back by exactly 100 years. After the Ottoman Empire broke apart 1 century ago, the Republic of Turkey was proclaimed in 1923 after the so-called War of Independence by the country's first president, Ebedi Şef, Eternal Chief, Mustafa Kemal, honored with the name Atatürk, Father of the Turks, and the founder of the oldest political party of Turkey, the aforementioned Republican People's Party, or CHP. But Turkey didn't actually gain real independence. It was still a semi-colonial country. What does that mean? Before the War of Independence, the Ottoman Empire had been declining as it was ridden with crises and got outcompeted by the Western European imperialist powers. It was considered the sick man of Europe. As it slowly dissolved, it was economically dependent on Germany and was pressured to fight on its side during World War I.
Do you like Atatürk? I feel about Atatürk as I feel about America's founders as well. You know, there's some good there, and then there's a lot of bad there as well. Ultimately, it's not identical to a bourgeois revolution against the monarchy, but, you know.
After the loss of the Central Powers, it got pillaged by French and British capital. The European imperialists were about to seize much of trade and industry, and the Turkish ruling class faced a life-or-death struggle. The emerging bourgeoisie, or capitalist class, united with the feudal gentry and the landlords, managed to take leadership.
Yeah, he's definitely better in the sense that he didn't own slaves. So there's that, but to be fair, it is much, much later as well.
In the independence struggle and consolidated the republic under a one-party state, formally abolishing the Sultanate and liberating the occupied territories. But the Turkish economy remained dependent, i.e., it provided cheap raw materials and workforce to the imperialists and opened a market for their industrial products. Large banks, transport routes, as well as parts of industry were still in the hands of foreign companies. This dependency would lead Turkey into a huge trade deficit in the 40s, further seeking foreign loans, subjugating the country and holding back independent industrial development. But not everyone lost due to this dependency. The Turkish capitalist class made a massive fortune through this collaboration in exploiting the toiling masses in Turkey, seizing properties of Anatolian Greeks and Armenians, and pandered to the imperialist fear of rising communism after the October Revolution in Russia in 1917. And anti-communism would unite them throughout the century, both ideologically and in terms of concrete organization. This analysis was key for one of the, if not the most notable Turkish communist, Ibrahim Kaypakaya, who would later criticize the Turkish left, which proposed such things as emphasizing an alliance with the Kemalist movement, painting them as an independent progressive revolutionary force. However, Kaypakaya wrote, quote, "The Kemalists, even during the years of the Liberation War, were embarking on collaboration with the imperialists. They did not neglect to carry out covert collaboration with them against the Socialist Soviet Union externally and against communists, working class, and other toiling people internally. On the other hand, while raining down the most extreme compliments in order to obtain aid, on the other were seeking a basis for secret agreements to be made with the US, Britain, and France. The Kemalist dictatorship is a military fascist dictatorship over the workers, peasants, urban petty bourgeoisie, low-ranking public servants, and Democrat intellectuals. Toward the end of the 19th century, Marxist ideas had begun to penetrate Turkish society, and various Turkish communist groups had begun.
Not to get you into trouble with Turkish chatters, but do you think Kemal Pasha was a MI6 plant similar to Reza Pahlavi? No, I don't think so.
To emerge, not just in Turkey. Some emigre workers in Germany, referred to as the Turkish Spartakists, had joined up with.
I think he was a Yoruba, and some of that, like some of the revolutions that came about as a consequence of his like Yoruba attitude were actually good. Like things that I also personally believe were very socially progressive and like a legitimately good thing. Yeah, he was a Franco-boo, big French Revolution head for sure. That's why laïcité was implemented as well.
Rosa Luxemburg and the other Spartakists in Germany, and sought to bring the lessons of the November Revolution back home. These groups would then merge into the Communist Party of Turkey, or short TKP, in Baku. Only 1 year after the TKP was founded in 1920, its founder, Mustafa Sufi, and the entire 14-member leadership were brutally assassinated, most likely on the order of Mustafa Kemal, after being lured on a boat at the Black Sea. Sufi's Russian wife, Maria, was taken hostage, abused, and used as a sex slave by the murderers. In 1923, the state closed down the Istanbul Workers' Association, arrested its leaders, and formed its own bourgeois unions to draw people away from workers' organizations. Already in 1920,
kind of like AFL-CIA.
Mustafa Kemal had set up a fake puppet communist party to counter the growing influence of the actual communists. The actual Communist Party was then banned in 1925 and had to operate underground throughout the 20th century. In 1927, railway workers organized a massive strike lasting for 2 weeks against a French company operating in Turkey. Hundreds of workers and their family members laid down on the tracks, and the Kemalist government dispatched a military unit which opened fire on the unarmed workers and their families, covering the rails in blood. With the extensive adoption of the Codice Rocco, the fascist penal code enacted under Mussolini in Italy, paragraphs 141 and 142 found their way into Turkish law, prohibiting any organization of class-based associations and imposing the death penalty on anyone leading them. The Atatürk reforms made Turkey into a secular modern state, but Mustafa Kemal also wanted to create a homogeneous Turkey. What was meant by this, the minority ethnic groups had to experience brutally. The Kurds, living predominantly in the southeast or in northern Kurdistan, make up around 20 to 25% of Turkey's population. Atatürk, called them Mountain Turks, banned the Kurdish language in schools, prohibiting speaking Kurdish in public spaces, Kurdish newspapers, and Kurdish parties. Hundreds of thousands of Kurds were forcibly deported out of Turkey to Turkify the region. After Kurds rebelled against the repression, the state initiated a pogrom in the Kurdish majority region of Diyarbakir, burning down villages and killing over 15,000 people. Later in the 30s, the Turkish armed forces were sent to crush a Zaza Kurdish rebellion in the notorious Dersim genocide, in which tens of thousands of people were massacred. Atatürk's Turkification was in line with the previous regime of the Young Turks, which committed the Armenian genocide, murdering over 1.5 million Armenians, with only a fraction of the Armenian population surviving. The Turkish government denies the genocide to this day. From 1935, German imperialism would regain its influence over Turkey. Germany helped train Turkish soldiers and was Turkey's primary source for armaments, and the Nazis would find great admiration among their quickly growing Turkish counterparts. Ultranationalists in Turkey had excellent relations with Nazi Germany, and its most notorious representative, Colonel Alparslan Türkeş, was the contact person of the Nazis in Turkey. He would frequently quote Hitler's Mein Kampf in his speeches, and his so-called pan-Turkist movement's support for Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini was strong. Ruzi Nazar, another prominent pan-Turkist, joined the Nazis on the Eastern Front to fight for the creation of a Turkestan. Nazar was later recruited by the Americans and became the CIA's station chief in Turkey. More on that later. The pseudoscientific pan-Turkism movement, with its doctrine of racial superiority, sees as its goal the political and cultural unification of all Turkic peoples. Since many ethnic Turks lived in the Soviet Union, the movement naturally linked its reactionary ideology to the destruction of the Soviet Union and communism. It was not until 1945, when Turkey declared war on Germany.
How does Turkey deny the Armenian genocide? They say that it is, one, they say it is a lie. And two, it's taught in schools as like a forced immigration of Armenians into Syria, specifically like a Trail of Tears type situation, exactly, where like in the most reductive terms, it basically is Armenians collaborated in the villages in the eastern part of Turkey with the Russians because they were Orthodox Christians, just like the Russians were during World War I. And they engaged in pogroms against Turkish Muslim populations and like Turkish populations. And so the Turkish military came in and forcibly removed them from their homes and forced them to basically march to Syria and many other places. And then some people died alongside in that process. Like that's the way that it is described. Well, but it is a deliberate, systematic, targeted ethnic cleansing campaign, of course.
When it was pretty much clear that they were losing. Nazi Germany was defeated, but fascism was not. In collaboration with the
the official Turkish government position on obviously World War II was neutrality, like, or not even neutrality, but just not collaborating with the Germans. In World War I, if you guys remember, talked about this before, World War I, Turkey was aligned with Germany. World War I is obviously very different than World War II in general. World War I in and of itself is just a world war amongst superpowers, all colonial superpowers, central powers fighting against one another, and utilizing that as a way to, pick apart other colonies. That's how England took over, British Palestinian Mandate from the Ottoman Empire, for example. And yeah, it was imperialist colonialist competition. Yes. Exactly. And Turkey, in its developmentary stages, was like, we are not participating. We are not participating in World War II at all. When Germany wanted to reinstate the alliance that Turkey or the Ottoman Empire previously had.
Imperialist master, the United States. The pan-Turkist leaders would play a key role in the brutal unleashing of fascist violence against the left in Turkey. After the defeat of Nazi Germany, the US was by far the dominant capitalist imperialist power in the world. But there was no time to rest for the Yankees. There was still a more potent enemy out there, growing in popularity, not least due to the Soviet Union's central role in the defeat of Hitler. US President Harry Truman announced the Truman Doctrine, a plan to contain the Soviet Union and rising communist organization, particularly in Greece and Turkey, by asking Congress for $400 million in military and economic assistance, specifically for Greece and Turkey. In his address to Congress,
The Dagestan massacre was posed at a progressive cause and people believed it. Dagestan is not just about being Kurdish, though. State was also trying to outlaw old feudal systems and serfdom. Fascists took advantage of this very well.
In 1947, Truman stressed, quote, "Should we fail Greece and Turkey in this fateful hour, the effect will be far-reaching to the west as well as to the east. We must take immediate and resolute action." The request was approved in 1948, the same year.
That video blames every other country but not Turkey. Wait, what? Dude, if you think this video is not completely fucking anti everything Turkey related and how you're lost in the sauce, I think.
When Turkey joined the Marshall Plan and was admitted into the IMF. The United States was now the chief imperialist partner of the Turkish state, but it was more than just a partner. Meanwhile, in 1948, in northern Turkey, a certain someone, whom the Turkish state would consider as the most dangerous revolutionary and a serious threat to the government, saw the light of day. Born into a poor peasant Alevi family, Ibrahim Kaypakaya would later become the foremost manifestation of the revolutionary communist line of the Turkish proletariat. A symbol of camaraderie and the armed struggle, he would live a short life, but an important one. At the time of his birth, the Turkish government underwent certain changes to adapt to the new imperial.
Dersim still is a relatively big stronghold for socialism. Dersim supports current CHP, CHP, TKP, Turkish Communist Party, and DEM, the Kurdish majority party. Dersim is a stronghold for the socialists. If you recall, I mean, way back in the day when they directly elected a dirty commie in Dersim as well.
Imperialist world order. Within the Turkish ruling class, a variety of cliques with competing interests formed their separate parties. The newly created center-right Democrat Party, or short, DP, was one of them, founded by former members of the CHP, most prominently by the soon infamous Prime Minister Adnan Menderes. The shift from a one-party government to a multi-party state wasn't out of an idealist concern for democracy. The then-president İsmet İnönü, known as the right-hand man of Mustafa Kemal, knew very well that if opposition parties weren't included, Turkey would fall to social rebellion. Calls for freedom of speech and so on were of course justified, but primarily it was because, quote, the comprador big bourgeoisie and landlords clique in opposition wanted the same thing for themselves. On the other hand, the international situation is forcing the bourgeoisie and landlord class to adopt parliament, since an open terrorist dictatorship that abolishes parliament will expose its fascist visage both to the popular masses domestically and world public opinion and be isolated. This is the function of parliament in Turkey, to mask fascism. The government had introduced a trade union law which was supposed to fulfill the, quote, necessity of Western democracy.
Like something to remember, because it's Turkey and where there's a predominantly Western audience watching this, is like what he's describing there is a socialist framework on the Turkish parliament. And therefore, it is no different than like the American bourgeois democracy. Okay? Something to remind people is that functionally, fundamentally, it is a democracy identical to the American democracy or democracy that you see in European countries. It is, however, a bourgeois democracy. And therefore, that is a socialist critique of bourgeois democracy and not necessarily saying it's fake.
Legalizing the formation of trade unions, but maintaining the ban on strikes. Unions also had to be apolitical and, quote, nationally oriented instead of internationalist. In order to control the emerging labor movement, the Turkish Ministry of Labor, with the help of US advisors, such as the anti-communist organizer and later leader of the US Trade Union Federation, AFL-CIO, Brown, established the Turkish, the Confederation of Turkish Workers Union. Its leader declared to struggle, quote, against the abominable communism. The state-affiliated trade union would receive lots of funding from the Agency for International Development, a US body that works closely with the CIA. In its program some years later, the union declared that it, quote, pursues a policy that has the aim of eliminating the causes of the deepening of class differences and class conflicts, and aims to establish balance, peace, and cooperation between the classes. After World War I, Irving Brown, along with CPUSA member turned CIA help.
What is bourgeois democracy? Is it a bad thing if we have it? Bourgeois democracy, is it a bad thing if we have it? I mean, if you're a worker, it's not great for you. If you're a liberal, you think it's great. It's the peak of democracy. I don't know. Do you think our current two-party system that seemingly always aligns on certain boundaries that pertain to improving material conditions for all Americans unconditionally is a good thing, then yeah, you'll see it as a good thing. You'll see it as a positive. It always has the capacity to erode civil liberties and also greatly worsen material conditions for the